Welcome. I'm Robert Estrin here at livingpianist.com and virtualsheetmusic.com. This is part 2 of a two-part series in Hanon. How do you know what the right fingering is for major scales and arpeggios? Check out the link below if you haven't seen part 1. Well, this is a great question, and fortunately there's a resource on the piano. And it's not so easy on other instruments, which I'm going to tell you about briefly, and then we're going to revisit this in just a moment. You know, if you play the violin, there are different fingerings at different schools of thought for the violin on scales. Everybody plays with different fingering concepts. Even on the French horn, which I also play, there's standard fingering, but there are books written about alternate fingerings. Same is true on woodwind instruments. But fortunately on the piano, there is the gospel, and the gospel is Hanon. And the vast majority of people who study the piano use the fingering in Hanon. It's very easy. Now, so what is fingering all about in scales and arpeggios? Well, simply put, we have only 10 fingers, but the piano, of course, you play up and down the keyboard. Generally speaking, you play scales and arpeggios 4 octaves up and down. So you must have finger crossings. Simply put, your hands are mirror images of one another. So going up, the right hand has thumb crossings, and the left hand has 3rd and 4th finger crossings. Coming down, it's reversed. The right hand has 3rd and 4th finger crossings, and the left hand has thumb crossings. So in each scale, there are 8 fingerings you must memorize. So for example, in the C major scale, the right hand crosses on C and F, because this is how you can get up the whole scale. And so on. The left hand has 3rd finger on A and 4th finger on D. So once you have the first octave, you've got the whole scale ascending. Coming down, the right hand has a 3rd finger crossing on E, a 4th finger on B. The left hand has thumb crossings on G and C. Now, you might think, how am I going to learn all my scales and arpeggios? That's a lot of information. Well, it is, but not as much as you think, because the same patterns that are used in the C major scale are used in a whole bunch of other major and minor scales, like C, G, D, A, and E, all have the same basic patterns. Now, there are some you will have to learn that are fresh, like a B-flat major scale is somewhat unique, although it's similar to E-flat. So there are other similarities along the way. Hanon is the wonderful resource. I'm going to just mention as a footnote, there is a second school of thought that I've never met anybody who uses because it's so unusual, but it's worthy of mentioning this little footnote, which is mirror fingering. Mirror fingering is a whole separate concept of fingering on the piano for scales and arpeggios, which puts the thumb crossing on the same note. The thumb plays the same note in both hands on all the scales and arpeggios. And it's a whole different way of approaching scales and arpeggios. And if any of you study scales and arpeggios with mirror fingering, I'd love to hear from you. I've never talked to anybody who's mastered that technique, and it is not very commonly used. So I'd love to hear from you on that. For the rest of us, Hanon is great. Check it out. Thanks for joining me, Robert Estrin, here at livingpianist.com and virtualsheetmusic.com.